Volume 6 of the Crime, Justice, and Society Dialogues, organized by the Indian Society of Criminology. I thank each one of you from across institutions and regions for taking the time to join us today. A brief introduction about the Society and this lecture series for all new participants. The Indian Society of Criminology was established in 1970 at the Department of Criminology, University of Madras, with the objective to advance the study and application of criminology and allied sciences. Over the decades, the ISC had grown into a national professional body with over 2,200 members across various fields of criminology, law, and sociology, playing a vital role in shaping criminological thoughts in India through organization of All India Criminology Conferences, publication of the Indian Journal of Criminology, and conducting various academic programs through its affiliated institutions. The Crime, Justice and Society Dialogues lecture series is envisioned as a bi-weekly academic platform bringing together scholars from across the world with an aim to reconnect students and early career scholars with theory and comparative perspectives while remaining attentive to contemporary realities. Particularly, this series is directed at students, scholars, and early career academics, paving way for sustained international scholarship beyond conferences and textbooks. I would now like to place on record my sincere gratitude to the leadership of the Indian Society of Criminology for their constant encouragement and support for this initiative, particularly Dr. N.K. Chakraborty, President ISC, Dr. Madhava Somasundaram, Chairperson ISC, Dr. M.D. Alan Selvakumar, Secretary ISC, and all the other office bearers of the Society whose guidance and trust have made this lecture series possible. I once again welcome all of you to this lecture and sincerely thank our speaker, Dr. A. Shankar Prakash, for agreeing to be part of this journey. Dr. A. Shankar Prakash is a researcher in critical and conservation criminology focused on prevention strategies for environmental and wildlife crime. He is currently lead of research and program of the Wildlife Enforcement Monitoring System Initiative. He holds a PhD from the Department of Criminology, University of Madras, where his doctoral work examined wildlife crime prevention in the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, building on his postgraduate studies in criminology and criminal justice administration at the same department. His undergraduate degree in religion, philosophy, and sociology is from the American College, Madurai. He has trained at the Winter School on Environmental Crime run by the United Nations Inter-Regional Crime and Justice Research Institute in Italy and served as a United Nations volunteer at the 14th UN Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice in Japan. With that, I once again thank you all for joining us today. I also kindly request all participants to mark their attendance by filling out the Google form shared in the chat box to facilitate the issuance of certificates. I now invite Dr. A. Shankar Prakash to take this session forward. Over to you, Dr. Shankar.
Thank you so much, Ms. Manjari. Thank you so much for giving an overview of the Indian Society of Criminology and about this very good lecture series. And I am very much thankful to the office bearers of Indian Society of Criminology for having inviting me to this dialogue. And especially, I put my thanks in record to Mr. Jose Benjamin and the team who is making this lecture possible. So I think many of you might have heard about what is actually green criminology or conservation criminology or rural criminology in your academic endeavor. I think some of the participants may not from the criminological background. So during my lecture, I can able to give some foundational concepts of what these three criminological subdisciplines are. And also, I want to emphasize that though these three subdisciplines are now emerging as a distinct academic endeavor, so these three subdisciplines have developed from the critical criminology actually. So in criminology, we studied that critical criminology is more of a who defines crime and who becomes an offender. So, for example, most of the critical criminology draws its ideology from the economical point of view. For example, Karl Marx, Hegel. So from there, we started to develop critical criminology. Then it becomes how state becomes a silent spectator or perpetrator of crime. So this is the academic exploration of critical criminology. Then within critical criminology, due to advent of many technology and environmental awareness, for example, starting from 1970s, so there was a conscious effort to put environment first. So United Nations Environment Program has initiated several programs after 1970s. Coincidentally, India also enacted its Wildlife Protection Act in 1972. So it's a part of the global movement towards protection of environment. Then slowly, many other subdisciplines like green and conservation criminology has emerged. Conservation criminology and rural criminology is very recent at. For example, conservation criminology was become an academic discourse from 2010s onwards. Then rural criminology, previously rural criminology was part of a sociological discipline. Then several mainstream criminologists start to explore a dedicated field called rural criminology as well. So whenever we talk about crime, so we are very much focused towards the urban-centric crime prevention. For example, policing or anything. So we are most of the research in Western countries also try to explore the urban point of view of crime. So there is a urban myopia in Western criminology, and also it somehow reflect in the Indian criminology as well. Now we call it as a Southern criminology. So Northwest, North-South criminology has been now developed, and this is more of a carbon copy of what the developed, so the so-called developed countries like United Nations, United States, or European countries doing, that also reflects in the research and academic endeavor we are following in Indian setting as well. So I thought of how we can substantiate that claim with data. So then I started to explore two data points. For example, how we can substantiate that our Indian criminological endeavors are mostly skewed towards urban criminology. So I brought in two data points. For example, from 1973, our Indian Society of Criminology has been publishing at least two volumes a year. So I got to go through all the titles published from 1973 onwards. For example, I shortlisted about 635 titles, excluding titles which are directly talks about forensic science. So there are several articles directly discuss about the forensic science. I excluded those titles, and I brought in around 635 titles so far published in Indian Journal of Criminology till 2025. Then I relied on the Shodhganga, the UGC's PhD thesis database. So I shortlisted about 8 universities offering criminology, and there also I have excluded PhD theses which are relevant to forensic science. So I listed out around 188 PhD theses. So this is the, for example, a glimpse of that data. For example, of the 188 PhD thesis, so we got only two green criminologists. We need to at least bring out one or two research articles or PhD theses within this subdisciplines hereafter. So this is my expectation, and I hope this will reflect in coming future. And I am seeing some encouraging results from the upcoming students and scholars also more towards. I heard that some of the students in Madras University is also working on wildlife crime, and many of the students are speaking to me regarding how we can explore green criminology, those aspects. And I hope in coming years we will be having more such research coming in. So those who are not aware of what is green criminology, just a overview. So green criminology is fundamentally based on ecological justice perspective. For example, in criminology, anything is defined in criminal law is become crime. So green criminology is trying to negate that process. For example, state-sponsored harms. So whenever some exploration or oil exploration or mining activity, the state is giving certain permission to those companies or private entities to extract some resources. But those extraction definitely have an ecological impact. So even though we have a system in place to check everything, still due to the little oversight of those activities, we have a number of evidence such exploration ultimately results in destruction of environment or exploiting the resources much more than the allocated thing. For example, in Tamil Nadu, there are several quarries like stone quarries operating in southern Tamil Nadu. For example, Tirunelveli, Tenkasi, those districts. So the government is through the mining department, the government is allocating certain blocks. For example, this much of blocks alone you can extract the resources. But we have a strong evidence unearthed that. So the individuals, those who are mining, they are exploiting the blocks more than it is being given. The permission has been given. So, for example, one of the estimates told that around 1,500 crores worth of stones have been excavated more than the given permission. So this is one of the grave concern. Our mainstream criminological dialogue somehow missed to discuss. So since we are very much particular about the criminal or codified crime, so we somehow overlook these harms being done by uh, through some permission given by the state. So this is one of the grave concern being discussed in the green criminology. On the other hand, we have the tendency to criminalize the individual behavior. For example, if someone is throwing some uh, dust or garbage or something, so we are putting in fine. So our system somehow promoting the large scale exploitation within the given permission as a violation. On the other hand, those who are individual, those who somehow violate the environmental norms, for example, Air Act, Water Act, and Environment Act, so we are criminalizing those individuals in a strict manner. For example, I can give a stalking example. From 2019 onwards, for example, Tamil Nadu, we have abolished or prohibited single-use plastic. For about 14 plus items has been identified, and we have completely on paper abolished those single-use plastics. For example, a polythene cover, plastic straw, those things. But most of the single-use plastics being generated by the fast and FMCG companies, fast-moving consumer goods companies. For example, shampoo sachet or soap. So those are also single-use plastics, but still we are allowing the companies to produce the plastic, and there is a system in place like extended producer responsibility. So in every plastic producing companies, they need to set up a collection center. So whenever the user is using the product, they need to give back the plastic or plastic paper or plastic bottles to the collection center for the companies to take care of it. Anyhow, by recycling it or downcycling it. So they need to take care of those things. But though we have codified Environmental Protection Act under which we have a extended producer responsibility, still we couldn't able to make the FMCG companies to comply with those rules. On the other hand, whenever a street vendor or someone, those who are using the single-use plastic to do their livelihood, for example, some flower vendor may use single-use plastic to give away their flowers to the customer. But our corporation and our enforcement agencies are very hard to go after them. So this is one of the critical criminological perspective. So the scholars within the environmental crime or environmental harm or an umbrella term green criminology, they are questioning this what to say, a disproportionate implementation of law. On the other hand, the corporates or the big mining companies given free hand to exploit the environment. On the other hand, we are making the individuals accountable for their minimal act, which may have very minimal impact on the environment. So we are in the era of climate change. So there is a dialogue that global north countries, for example, from 1920s onwards, when the industrialized motor companies have emerged. So they used fossil fuels in a disproportionate manner. So due to that, there are scientific evidences that usage of fossil fuel is one of the major catalyst for climate change and the global warming. So now in the United Nations COP, the Conference of Parties meeting on climate change, now the developing countries are asking the developed countries to bear the cost. So they are the one who have caused so much of emission, but the impact of climate change is being very hard on the developing countries. For example, you might have heard about Pakistan flooding some a few years back. So the per capita emission of Pakistan with regard to fossil fuel emission is very less, but they have faced a very huge floods, and I think there are several hundreds of crores of loss has been incurred. Now there are talks going on to make those developed countries to share the cost to for the developing countries to face the impacts of environmental degradation or climate change related issues. So this is the conceptual or philosophical discussion being initiated by the criminological scholars. So this is the thing. So the first thing is ecological harm. So now there are discussions going on European Union to bring in a new criminal criminal entity like ecocide. So for example, we have suicide or homicide. No. So now there are lobbying being going on in European Union to pressure the European Union to come up with a convention on ecocide to especially to make the larger corporations accountable for their ecological harm. Then the environmental justice perspective. This is also a very crucial discussion being initiated by the green criminological scholars. For example, you might have heard about thermal power plants. So in Chennai, so there is most of the thermal power plants are based in northern part of Chennai. So why those power plants are placed in particular location? There may be some scientific reason, but the people living in and around the thermal power plants are disproportionately exposed to the polluted matters. So, for example, PM 2.5, PM 10, nitrous oxide. So, whenever there is a flood, so there is a CPCL, the oil refinery company, Chennai Petrochemical Limited. So whenever there is some flooding is happening, the crude oil being mixed in the Koshastalaya river or something. So you might have heard many news. Some 3 4 years back, there was a huge flood, and from the CPCL there was an oil leak. So most of the village people has been affected. The fisherman was affected, and most of the birds, the migratory birds, are being soaked with the oil. So these are the some of the environmental justice perspective being discussed. So why certain marginalized community people are always disproportionately affected by the uh, environmentally polluting industries. So this is one of the crucial discussion points within the green criminology. Then nowadays there is a species justice perspective is also emerging. So whenever our criminology is mostly human oriented, so the crime against human. But now there are dialogues on species justice. So as a human, how we can define or how non-human animals or non-human entities like plants, they do have justice. This may be seems like a utopian concept or something at this point, but there are several encouraging dialogue to establish that as well. For example, for now in India we have tiger reserve. So to give tigers in volatile environment, we are brought in tiger reserve. This is based on the species justice. Due to fragmentation of landscapes, the tiger population is also year on year there is an increase in tiger population. So the government is taking certain initiatives to do justice to the non-human animals as well. So these are the recent developments within green criminology. So if you have any questions, I expect to complete this lecture in about 15 20 minutes. Then we have 15 20 minutes question session. Then we can discuss your questions. Then comes to the conservation criminology. So conservation criminology is, I told, it's a very new subdiscipline. From 2010 onwards, it has been emerged to concentrate on three critical aspects. One, it draws the main foundations from the mainstream criminology, how the crime is being committed, how the criminal behavior is there. So it draws some ideological or theoretical foundation from mainstream criminology. Then it combines that to the natural resource management. So, for example, any critical environmentalist, they will not be go by the sustainable use. So they want any resources which is sustainable. It's a what to say? It's a uh, uh, it's a flowery term to convince people. For example, sustainable forest management. So we will be exploiting forest, but in a sustainable way. So this is the term given to uh, exploiting the resources. But most of the environmentalists are not go with the sustainable term. Their term is they want to preserve. We should not see the human resources or human our environmental resources as a resource. When you say something is resource, it is for exploitation. So they want to change the perspective of resource itself. So they want to emphasize that it is for preservation, not for resource utilization. Then the conservation criminology perspective, they bring in the risk and decision science. So these are the things mostly used in actuarial, the statistical subdiscipline called actuarial science. So for example, insurance companies, so they will be evaluating the risk of something. So when they formulating a policy, so they will factor in some of the risk. Based on that, they will fix the premium and everything. No, so like that, they are bringing the risk and decision science into the conservation criminology perspective. This is also a very new subdiscipline, but there are few global north scholars being working on conservation criminology, and now there are several southern criminological perspective. For example, South America, Colombia, Mexico, the scholars from those part of Earth, they are also now working on to, because most of the southern part of the hemisphere, for example, South America, India, or Africa. So these are in the southern hemisphere. So most of the resource-rich countries are from southern hemisphere. So they have a very conducive climatic condition for forest to grow. So most of the exploitation being done on the global south country. So now there are indigenous scholars, those who are speaking out on the exploitation being meted out against their own home. So this is one of the typical example how the conservation in India or for any country for that matter. So most of the time conservation is looked at as a exclusion. For example, uh, like fortress conservation, they call it as a fortress conservation. So you to, if some human elements is there within the protected area, they are bound to exploit the nature. So this is the mindset we have right now. So our laws also defined or constructed based on that mindset. That's why we have the protected area, national park. Though the objective of protected area and national park is to preserve or conserve the local wildlife or environment, in a way, how it affects the human. So most of the time, it excludes the human. So for example, in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve. So Mudumalai Tiger Reserve is earlierly, before 2007, it was a wildlife sanctuary, Mudumalai Wildlife Sanctuary. Then in 2007, the Tamil Nadu government proposed to the union government to make it as a tiger reserve. So about 364 square kilometers of the Mudumalai Wildlife Sanctuary has been designated as a core area of tiger reserve. So whenever there is a core area is designated, so the government is having a scheme called voluntary relocation. So to give the tiger and the other wildlife an involatile living environment, our government has the system of moving out the individual, those who are residing inside the forest. So that's why they introduced the voluntary relocation scheme. But right now there are about 55 tiger reserves in India. If you take any of the tiger reserves for that matter, there are, uh, uh, based on my research, I would say there is no voluntariness. Largely, there is no voluntariness in relocation. For example, in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, there are non-tribals also residing inside the core area. They are residing in the core area from the British era. So from 100 or 150 years back, they have uh, came to the tiger reserve to do some hard labor or something. But there are several tribal population being there for more than several centuries. But whenever the voluntary relocation scheme is announced, most of the non-tribals are somehow voluntary to move out of the forest. So they think that within residing within a core area of tiger reserve has been hampering some of the schemes like good road facility or hospital facility, because within that core tiger reserve, the government cannot bring in several developmental activities. That includes even the hospital. So whenever there is an emergency, so they feel that we need to go out of the core area. So that's why most of the non-tribals always willing to relocate voluntarily by taking some skip. There is a scheme called Golden Handshake. For example, within the core area, somebody is having some 1 acre or 2 acre of land. They can surrender that land title to the forest department. The forest department will give the equal land outside the tiger reserve. So this is one scheme. Another scheme is you will surrender your title and the forest department will pay at least 10 lakh rupees per individual, per adult individual within the house. Within the house. For example, if you have 3 or 4 adult within a family, so they will be getting about 40 lakhs. So with that 40 lakhs, they can move out of the forest and they can buy land somewhere and they can settle there. But most of the tribal community members are not willing to relocate because they have a belongingness to that particular location. So in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, several tribal community members are also uh, expressed their willingness to move out in the pretext of believing some of the, for example, assurances given by the state. So in the relocated area, the government will assist them to find job. The government will create all the necessary facilities like floor facility, water facility, drainage facility, everything. So in believing such assurances, some of the tribal community members are also willing to move out. But most of the assurances are not fulfilled by the state. So this is the major thing. So I have interacted with several tribal community members, those who are moved out of core area. So now their mindset is they want to go back to their ancestral land. So since none of the assurances are fulfilled, this is the case of most of the tiger reserve, not only Mudumalai, most of the tiger reserve, the state could not be able to fulfill what it has assured. In addition to it, there are several corruption related issues as well. So within Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, so these are the words, insights shared by the tribal community members. So for example, Kurumbar community. So yeah, several Kurumbal tribal community members are being cheated by forest department officials. So there is a criminal case has been registered. There is an investigation going on. So the corrupt forest officials have somehow appropriated about to the tune of 2 crore rupees meant for the tribal community members. So these are some of the challenges we have in the voluntary relocation, and it involves corruption of government officials. So these are the concrete points for the conservation criminologist or the broader criminological scholars to argue for never move out the indigenous community out of the forest. They know how to coexist with the wildlife. So, for example, tigers are there, elephants are there. There may be some human wildlife negative interaction. We cannot deny that there will be some negative interaction. For example, the mainstream term is called human wildlife conflict, but as a social science experts, we should not use the term called conflict. So that's why there is a new term called human wildlife negative interaction. So there may be some casualties, but the tribal community members have a traditional knowledge of how to identify a tiger, the presence of tiger or elephant. So they will somehow avoid the negative interaction. So that's why they are coexisting within the forest along with the wildlife. So that's why the conservation criminology scholars are now speaking about don't move the local community or indigenous community out of the forest. the forest department or wildlife department should work with the local community and the make them as a protectors of forest. So this is the dialogue being discussed in the conservation criminological fraternity as well. So then comes to the rural criminological perspective. So like I mentioned, compared to green and conservation criminology, there are few more research or PhD theses being done in rural setting. For example, there are PhD theses from rural setting, especially on child marriage, and few articles on caste-based atrocities and farmer suicide. So these are some of the themes being observed within our Indian criminology fraternity. So right now we have so many issues to explore within the rural setting in India. So most of the population now resides in rural area, and the crime and issues within the rural setting is completely different from the urban setting. So for example, we see water conflicts are there, land issues. For example, Panjami lands. So the Panjabi lands are the land title given the British to the socially ostracized communities, but there are several caste Hindu or oppressor caste communities, those who are appropriated those Panjabi lands. So those discussions also being right now being in some of the southern parts of India as well. So there are several bonded labor issues as well. Recently, we come across many caste-based discrimination. For example, in Tamil Nadu, we know that Vengai issue, several violent attack against the marginalized communities like scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So these are the issues we are, as an Indian criminology fraternity, we are yet to explore. There are few research being conducted, but we are yet to explore these timely or the contemporary social problems. And also within the rural setting, they have their own norms. So we know crime is different. Crime is a codified law. Norm is an uncodified law. It's like an internal norms for each village. So most of the time, those norms are being dictated by the caste Hindus or the dominant community members within that village area. So this is also one of the crucial points our criminological fraternity needs to explore in coming years. So one more issue we come across, I studied from some of the northern part of India is they never go to the police. For example, any issue within their villages happen, they have a Kap Panchayat system. So once again, the Kap Panchayat is also dominated by the uh, dominant caste people. So they deliver justice. Uh, I know one such incident in Tamil Nadu itself. So in near to Chennai, there is a place called Padaverkadu. It's mostly a fisherman dominated hamlet. So one particular activist who questioned the village head. So there is an allegation that the village head has been appropriated several welfare money meant for the fishermen. So the particular activist questioned that village head. So he raised a police complaint. But instead of addressing his reservations or complaints, the village head they gathered the Kap Panchayat, similar of Kap Panchayat related setting, and asked that activist to apologize in front of everybody. And also they imposed 50,000 fine to that particular individual. So this is the shock for me. It has been reported in the media that activist went to the High Court. The High Court has came down heavily on the district administration. They have criticized the collector and the SP. How come in a democratic India, that too in 2025, a village level, some selected individuals imposing fine on a person. So these are some of the you might have think. We might have seen such things in a cinema like 1970s 80s cinemas. We might have saw those things, but these are the reality. In 2025 there are several village level impositions being done on the individuals, those who are vocal against the injustices being meted out within the village people. So these are the critical points our criminological scholars, I would say, need to explore more. So I hope, like I mentioned before, I hope our new criminology students and upcoming scholars will explore these areas as well. So now we are, that's why we need to move away from the urban centric perspective. So most of our research still urban centric. So somehow I am not requesting or appealing to have more research in rural or green or conservation criminology more, but at least we need to start exploring those domains as well. So that's how we can able to expand the knowledge exploration of Indian criminology. So whenever we do criminological exploration, we should not replicate the global north. We need to, and also I have a very curious point of view of why we are yet to explore our own theoretical explanation. For example, any of the theory we study in mainstream criminology in our post graduation. So most of the theory is being developed in global north. Any theory for that matter, so those theory may not be applicable to Indian setting. So India is a subcontinent, right? So we have a various linguistic diversity, cultural diversity. So a Western or global North theoretical explanation of crime may not be applicable to our cultural or our diversified setting. So we need to explore theory building as well, Indianize the theory building or testing the theory of Western theories. For example, differential association theory. So we can make attempt to test whether the differential association theory as proclaimed by the Sutherland is applicable to India. So we need to do those theory building research as well. So ultimately, overall, this is my expectation. So I don't want this to be a lecture, and I want this to be a dialogue, but I hope the participants may raise some questions for me to give some clarity. And ultimately, we need to diversify. For example, nowadays most of the criminological curriculum is bringing in environmental crime as well, green criminology, environmental crime, but we need to expand that a bit, at least having a dedicated paper to discuss the subdisciplines of criminology like these three. So, like I mentioned before, we need to step out of the city and we need to explore our villages. So, with this, I conclude my lecture. So, if any of the participants have any questions, please do ask. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You can unmute yourself and ask question, or you can share it in the chat or anything. I can ready to answer. I hope I have given some perspective. Many of may not aware of these subdisciplines. I hope I have given some perspective to explain what these three are and how it is very relevant to Indian setting as well.
So I have a actually I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, yes, Dayanand, please.
Okay. So I already posted my question in the chat box. Anyway, I will go first. So why do you think like we have a limited like literature on like green chronological research in India? So does the PhD chair or the research chair plays a major role in encouraging the students to choose like green chronological research? Because I personally know like how you started your research and because when you started your first year of PhD, I was a master student in the University of Madras. So I know personally know like how Dr. Srinivasan like encouraged you to explore the like a new like new area of research. So so that's my question.
Thank you, Dayanand. It's actually a very good question. So most of the time, I see we do research based on the practicality. I would say it may be very open or maybe critical, but I would say most of the time we approach research from the practical point of view. And doing this green or conservation or rural criminology, it involves logistical challenges as well. For example, for my research in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, I have spent at least 6 months, not continuous 6 months, but I spent my at least 6 months of time, and it demanded some logistical challenges as well. So within the forest area, we cannot move easily, so we need to hire a jeep, and also the permissions. For example, permissions, so I need to write a proposal to the chief wildlife warden, and the proposal will be transferred to the field director of Mudumalai Tiger Reserve. So there is a paperwork related challenges and logistical related challenges, and also financial thing. So these, first thing, we approach research from a practical point of view. For example, I showed, I have enlisted all the titles of the articles published in Indian Journal of Criminology and the thesis published. I think I would say more than 30 to 40% of the thesis title or article title itself have the city name. For example, Chennai, or previously Madras, or Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow. So major, the title itself says a city. So it shows somehow we are doing research in a sense of practicality. So it's easy to do. So somebody doing research in Madras University, it's very easy to collect data within the Chennai city. So this is one of the first thing. Then the other things I have mentioned, no, the logistical or financial thing. So these are the challenges. For example, I had a funding from the UGC, so that's why I able to cover the cost of my fieldwork through that fellowship. So there are several variables which affect the our scholars to explore these least explored areas. I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. So all the best and for your future research and everything.
I think I had some issues with my connection. Now I am back.
Yes. Hello, Dr. Shankar Prakash. Am I audible now?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
sir. Sir, there are many questions by the participants in the chat box. You can view them and you can answer them in order if you would like, or however your
Okay.
convenience would be.
Yeah. Let me check. Let me check.
Yes, yes. Sure.
Hello,
Someone
sir.
has asked. Yes, yes.
Good morning, sir. This is Janardan Singh speaking. Am I
Okay.
audible?
Yes, 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 sir.
Sir, I have a question that how can we infuse green criminology in maritime studies? Can you give me some examples for future research works?
Uh, Within the broader conservation criminology, we can bring in marine related issues. For example, illegal, unregulated, and illegal fishing. So this is one of IEU. So we call it as an IEU. So there are several studies being emerging from the global north on illegal fishing related things. And we have several smuggling related issues as well. For example, specific to wildlife, from India to Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka to India, there are trafficking and smuggling of sea cucumbers, and also they are converging with other organized crimes as well. So not only the wildlife crime, the traffickers also do arms trafficking, and also other essential commodities also being smuggled. So I think with that we can bring in the marine related issues as well.
So we can do a study of, can we do a study of the effect of greenhouse or this newly introduced carbon credit system on the in fisheries in the seas, or not, sir? How
Carbon
does
credit
it
is, yeah, carbon credits is completely different, but there are several scholars being exploring that. There are several big corporations being exploiting the carbon credit. For example, some companies emitting some amount of carbon, so they will buy the carbon credits from some agencies. So there is some exploitation being reported by certain companies on carbon credits itself. It's a different area. The green criminology can also explore that. But with regard to marine, I don't think the carbon credit thing will applicable. I feel, yeah.
So, but I have seen many research works which have already been concluded that how these shipping vessels are polluting the seas, and they can escape from their liability by buying the carbon credits. So, will it have an adverse effect on the replenishment of the marine health and the wealth of the seas in the livestock, especially when the livestock that is available in the seas is in question? So can we
Yeah.
relate this in criminology in the with the maritime laws? That is my area of question.
Yeah, definitely. We have the provisions to make those companies accountable. For example, you are talking about carbon sink as well. So whenever there is some emission, for example, any oil company, oil transporting companies, they somehow releasing their waste into the sea. So there is a procedure to process the waste within their ship, but most of the vessels are not adhering to that regulations. But for example, you might have heard about in 2017 there was a collision between two ships in Chennai coast. So there was a very huge oil spill. So most of the time we see such incident as a environmental violation. So none of the responsible companies are criminally liable. They only liable. There was a civil liability by the National Green Tribunal. So there was some fine amount imposed. For example, I think 80 crore or something. So for the environmental damage they have done, but we are yet to explore that from a criminalization perspective. So I during my lecture also I have mentioned. So most of the time, most of the environmental harms being done by the corporates or like the shipping companies or something. So they only not a criminal liability. That's a civil liability. So we need to move away from that. Now there are discussions being going on, for example, ecocide. So this is one of the way to make those uh, environmental harm causing companies to make accountable. Let's see. I think future we may also have the ecocide related laws in India as well. So let me answer the questions in the chat box.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I think the first question from Navneet Gupta. How do you think the conflicts between environmental protection laws and livelihood rights of forest dependent communities being handled or dealt? Definitely, we are very poor in upholding the rights of the forest dwelling communities. For example, we have enacted Forest Rights Act, 2006 Forest Rights Act. So whenever there is a there are several tribal community members, those who don't have the documented title within their forest land. This Forest Right Act gives the provisions to claim those land title. They are being occupied for centuries, but still we are very poor in giving titles to the forest dwelling communities. For example, in my state, in Tamil Nadu, of the many states, Tamil Nadu is a very poor performing state in giving titles under the Forest Rights Act. So whenever there is a title claim is uh, claimed by the forest community members, the forest department most of the time trying ways to reject that claim. So this is the thing we have. and our tribal ministry. So they are also somehow trying. I would say they are not completely go with what the Ministry of Environment says or with any other ministry says. But somehow the tribal ministry is also be standing with the tribal community members, and I feel they need to still be proactive to make that there is a balance between the two. I think this is a very good question. Thank you, Navneet. Then, so one question from Parthasarathi Vasudevan. Punishment for hunting down animal species is not so high. Uh, Not that so high, just only fine. Okay. No, the punishment for hunting is several years imprisonment. For example, we have Schedule 1, Schedule 2 species. So Schedule 1 is the species which attracts more high level of protection. For example, tiger, elephant. So these are the Schedule 1 species. If somebody is hunting the Schedule 1 species, the minimum imprisonment will be 7 years. So we have a very stringent punishment for hunting. And one more thing, our justice system somehow overlooking is to punish the middleman or the end customer. So there is a challenge. So whenever some hunting is happening, so for example, tiger trade. So I am into wildlife related issues. So I know how the tiger trade is happening. So tiger trade is more of a well organized criminal network. So most of the time there will be a middleman. That person approach the tribal community member or any indigenous people to convince them to poach the tiger. But and there are several tribal community members. I don't want to name them. So they are being named as a tiger poachers. So there are several gangs being named after them. So such middlemen will approach them, and they do the hunting. So they are expert in hunting. So they do the thing and they transfer the skin or body parts to the middleman, and there is a route from India. It goes to Myanmar or Nepal, then to China. So this is the trade route of tiger related thing. But whenever our law enforcement agency do, we just catch hold of the low hanging fruits. For example, the tribal community or the community those who are involved in poaching. So, for example, recently the Tamil Nadu government, the state forest department has got conviction of one of the tiger poachers from Satyamangalam. So they are awarded about 5 years imprisonment. So this is the challenge we have. So whenever the law enforcement agency is pursuing, they could not able to move. They could not able to go up the ladder of the supply chain. So this is one of the challenges I see, and the punishment for hunting is relatively high actually. And Cyril Augustine, he asked a very good question. Why most of the environmental issues tried in environmental tribunals and not in criminal courts? So this is the challenge we have actually. So for example, we have criminalized certain acts in Environmental Protection Act, Air Act, Water Act, Forest Indian Forest Act, and also Wildlife Protection Act. But whenever a large scale violation, so one of the main challenges in criminalizing environmental issue is, for example, CPCL. I talked about an oil discharge. So how we bring in the mens rea. So they may claim that it is an accident. So that's why most of the time environmental issues are handled by the National Crime Tribunal. National Crime Tribunal only have the civil jurisdiction. They are not having the criminal jurisdiction. So the one of the major important challenge we have is finding the mens rea, and accuracy is there, but how we define the mens rea, how we can define the CPCL has voluntarily or intentionally released the oil. So these are the major challenge we have. It's a evolving jurisprudence. I feel so that's why we are now having a concept called semiology. So it's a somehow a critical to criminological dialogue. So whenever there is a harm, there should be a punishment. So semiology is going towards or going towards just harm, not the intention. So there is a harm, there is a victim, but no one is criminally prosecuted. So these are the emerging jurisprudence. I feel in coming years we will have some critical dialogue, or we may move towards to make accountable criminally those who are harming the environment. Naveen Gupta, he asked, do you think community participation acts as a protective factor or risk factor? I would say it's a protective factor. There are some challenges. So I would say most of the tribal community members, 90% of them for conservation. There may be one or two individuals, they may side with traffic criminal network to involve in poaching, but most of the tribal community members, 90% of them are for conservation. For example, I can say one of my fieldwork experiences. So I spoke with one of the farmers within the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve. He is residing in the buffer area of Tiger Reserve. So he do crops like potato or so some of the crops here he is doing. So I say whenever potato, most of the time the wild boar, wild pig, so they will be riding the crops. So what his observation is, I will leave some part of my potato crops for the wild pig. So if they come and eat it, they will go. So they will not disturb the larger thing. So this is the perspective they have. So whenever we need to have a good conservation model, with the participation of community alone, we can bring in the good conservation model. So this is the thing I would say. Yes, Muhammad. My doubt is not green criminology. I am new to criminology ecosystem. I want to explore more in this field, but I don't know start. Okay, I think this is more of a. I will share my email ID here in the chat. So if you somebody have any questions, you can write to me. So if I think we are, I think we are taking more time. 7 minutes past 11. So I think with this I can end the question. If anybody have any other questions relating to the topics we have discussed today, please write to me. I have shared my email ID in the chat box. I take this opportunity to thank Indian Society of Criminology for inviting me to this lecture series. This is a very good initiative, actually. I congratulate the Indian Society of Criminology for initiating such initiatives, and I feel this will inform most emerging criminologists or upcoming students to uh, engage with the criminological fraternity in an equal interval. I feel this is a very good initiative, and it should continue. Thank you once again for organizing this, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shankar Prakash. Um, Sir, as we conclude today's session of the Crime, Justice and Society Dialogues, I would like to formally place on record our heartfelt thanks to our speaker, Dr. Shankar Prakash, for delivering such an enriching lecture. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to the leadership and office bearers of the Indian Society of Criminology for their constant encouragement and support in making this lecture series possible. My thanks also goes to all the participants whose presence and active engagement have made this session vibrant and purposeful. Um, We are delighted to share the upcoming volumes of the series featuring distinguished scholars from across institutions. Volume 7, Dr. Hiru Susepio, University of Indonesia. Volume 8, Dr. Hani Matiani, National Forensic Science University. Volume 9, Nidhanya Babu, John Jay College of Criminal Justice, New York. Volume 10, Dr. Chirag Balyan, D.Y. Patil University. We look forward to your continued participation in these forthcoming dialogues, which promise to broaden perspectives and deepen critical engagement with contemporary criminological issues. I kindly request all of you to regularly visit the IOC website and follow our official social media handles for announcements, registration details, and updates regarding future sessions. Once again, I thank you all for being part of this volume. We look forward to seeing you in the next volume of the Crime, Justice, and Society Dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.